Defiant Daniel is the first in a series we're beginning with the new year. And so today we're going to be talking about Daniel and the Lion's Den. These dramas illustrate what could be called outrageous grace. Outrageous grace. And the ongoing theme is God has a plan. And throughout each one of these lessons that we do, and we'll be doing them off and on throughout this year, is that they are going to show us our beginnings and how we move through those beginnings into being a new being. The next is the story of Esther. That'll be next week, and we'll see that God has a plan for our lives and that they have deeper meaning than we even realize. And the one thing that we always keep in mind, that God's plan isn't separate from ours because God isn't separate from us. So God's plan is our plan. And as we learn and grow, we are shown the way to go to receive that plan that we're holding in our hearts right now. We brought those plans with us. They are the plan of our soul. The third week, the dreamer is about how grace took a boastful, arrogant boy to the pinnacles of faith and forgiveness. This is an interesting one as we see those different stages that we go through in our own lives to come to a place of forgiveness, to a place of peace in our lives. And this week we're going to just explore the drama of Daniel in the lion's den to illustrate that God, that spirit within us, can deliver us from whatever is going on in our life. And if we are willing to make ourselves receptive to the laws of the universe, then we will be able to overcome any situation. The book of Daniel in the Old Testament is the story of a young man who lived a life without compromise. He lived a life full of the Lord. And you know, we interpret the Lord in the Old Testament often as law. He truly respected and lived the law. The setting of the book of Daniel is during the period when Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon, and he conquered and occupied the territory of Judah. Now, Nebuchadnezzar besieged the kingdom of Judah and gathered all of the treasures, and he also took hostages. Then he did an interesting thing. Being a smart political leader, he took all the brightest and best from the nobility and from the royal family and planned to train them to team up with him as political leaders. Now, he was trying to intersperse them into his culture. He ordered his chief officer to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, and they were to be without any physical defect. They were supposed to be handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, and well-informed and quick to understand and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Now, he was going to teach them the language, and he was going to teach them the literature of the Babylonians. Very smart move on his part, because he was making them allies. The king also did something unheard of in those days, and he assigned them daily rations from his own table. And they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they would go into the service of the king and perhaps do ruling over some province or whatever it might be. So Daniel was among the young men that was chosen to go to Babylon. Daniel was from the royal family, and he was only a teenager at the time, as were his 3 friends. They were forced to travel 1,500 miles to Babylon. We remember the young men as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Don't you just love those names? Yeah. I just love those names. I like to say that. These names were the given names of pagan gods of Babylon. But the three young men continued to live up to their Hebrew names. We don't know, or at least I don't know what they are. Then we are told in Daniel 1:8, but Daniel, along with his three friends, resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he, Daniel, asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So, was he a defiant teenager? Is that all it was about? You know, teenagers can do that. You know, I'm not going to do it. I was with my grandson this last week, and I saw a little of that. I saw a little of that defiance. It was quieter, very quiet. In fact, it was pretty smart, like Daniel in a way. The chief official was horrified, and he explained to Daniel that the reason for his concern was that he could lose his head if Daniel and his three friends lose their health and don't, you know, and don't look as healthy as they should, as the other young people that are there. And so he said, you would endanger my head with the king if you showed up in poor condition. With an unshakable conviction, spiritual daring, and delicate finesse, Daniel and his companions revealed their extraordinary gifts of wisdom and character. You see, eating the king's food was much more than just defiance. It was related to the integrity of their vows of consecration as Hebrews to the God of Israel. Their dietary laws were very important to them. The ceremonial significance of the food was this, the king's food. The meat was killed as a burnt offering and dedicated to the pagan gods of Babylon. In other words, not only was the meat not kosher, eating it would mean compromising their faith as the Lord God and the laws given by God to Moses. And so this was a very serious business for them. And as young as they were, it was very significant that they understood this and realized that they were actually jeopardizing their souls if they did not do something different. So they resolved, regardless of the cost, that they would not defile themselves by eating any food dedicated to false gods. So how is this relevant to us today? We might ask ourselves if we are as dedicated to following universal law and refuse to eat the food of fear, anger, greed, avarice, judgment, superiority, inferiority, all of those feelings that we might have, that we engage in, that we eat of, that we appropriate into our minds and hearts. What do we serve in this life? Do we serve God, or do we serve, as they call it in the Bible, mammon? What is the main focus of our lives? Is it pleasure, money, or it could be even worry? How many of us are worriers? How many of us spend time and focus our energy on worry? Quite a few, I'm afraid. Daniel and his friends were committed to living a life without compromise. They had decided that they would not compromise their values, which translate as walking your talk. Do we live a life without compromise in walking our talk? Are we saying one thing and doing something else? All of us do to a certain extent, particularly when we're faced with the fiery furnace or the lion's den. By the way, do you know what a lion's favorite food is? Baked beans. Did you get beings? I know. I know, but it's probably the only thing that we're going to have in this whole talk that's really sort of funny. Oh, yes. So here's how Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, handled it. Their faith was put to the test. Daniel requested that their guards serve them only vegetables and water to eat for 10 days. Now, in the Bible, 10 days means as long as, as long as it takes to make sure that everything's going to be okay. And after 10 days, if they were not healthy, as the others in training, then they would look at other options. They decided that they would try this and see. And at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and the other young men looked healthier than those who were eating the royal food, which was probably very rich. So the guard did not force them to eat the king's diet, but continued to serve them the vegetables instead. Now, Daniel and his friends based their convictions on God's word from Leviticus 11 through 17, which outlines God's commands concerning eating clean and unclean food. And the boys were building their faith. You see, we build our faith a little at a time. A little bit at a time. We do it in the small things, and we work our way up to the bigger things. And in that way, we are becoming stronger and stronger as time goes by. It's helpful to distinguish between personal convictions and truth or spiritual conviction. Personal convictions come from family, community, and are often based on personal tastes and preferences or personal experiences. And that is what unity cultivates consciousness. For example, personal conviction might be concerning what is appropriate to wear. Some women used to think that it was sinful to wear slacks and only wore dresses. Makeup and lipstick were viewed as worldly. So there were some groups that said you should not use makeup. That has certainly changed over the years, hasn't it? Having a piano, an organ, or a musical instrument in the church was thought to be sinful because they were used in taverns and bars. Did you know that? Isn't that interesting? Personal convictions are just that, and they should not be forced on others. Spiritual convictions based on truth are based on universal laws stated in our 5 principles. And we're going to go through those 5 principles this morning just as a refresher because, 2 years ago that was our fall program. So we're going to just run through them very quickly here, but consider each one carefully. There is only one presence and one power. And what you see on the screen will be expanded from what I'm saying. Our essence, number 2, is our essence is of God, therefore we are divine in nature. Therefore we are divine in nature. We are co-creators with God. Number 3, we are co-creators with God, creating reality through our thoughts and our feelings. Number 4, through prayer and meditation, we align our heart and mind with God nature. Denials and affirmations are the tools that we use. Through thoughts and words and actions, we live the truth we know is number 5. I'm going to say that one again. Through thoughts, words, and actions, we live the truth we know. It is the 5th one that is the most difficult. And that is what this story is about. If we know the truth, do we really walk the talk and do as Daniel and his friends did? Are we convicted in the truth, or is it just for when the times are easy? Or when it is convenient? Or maybe it's just at home, but not in business. When examining our lifestyle and activities, there are 3 questions we want to ask ourselves. 3 questions. What is the effect that this will have on me? It's interesting. When we follow the truth of our being, we feel good inside. If we are not, we don't feel so good. We feel conflicted. We feel like we're being pulled here and pulled there. And yet when we stay steady in the truth, we realize that this is right. It feels right inside. Anytime you feel conflicted about something, you're not on the right track. You're just not. It just doesn't seem to work. There's always a way that is the right way for you, the perfect way for you. We look at, will this contribute to my physical and spiritual life? That's the question we want to ask ourselves. Sometimes we make a snap judgment and do something before we really think about it, and later we're sorry. But if there's something really important coming along, we need to really look at it and ask the question, what effect will this have on me? Number 2 is, what effect will it have on others? What effect will it have on others? Will what I am doing help or hinder the spiritual walk of others? That can happen in many, many ways. Number 3, what effect will it have on the divine plan for my life? Is it going to take me towards where I want to go, or is it going to take me away? We can live without compromise in our conviction. We can live without compromise in our conviction that the laws of the universe actually work, and they work regularly. And we've all experienced when we've gone against those laws. And we've experienced what has happened in our lives. But we have to examine our beliefs and our worries. These 3 questions help us to stand the test of opposition and temptation. Because we're tempted every day. We're tempted every day. And it is always a good idea to check the consequences of our actions. A man at the San Jose International Airport was worried about missing his plane, and he didn't have a watch on, and so he stopped a stranger and he said, could you please give me the time? And the stranger said, he smiled back and he said, sure. So he put down his 2 suitcases and he looked at his watch and he said, the time is 5:09. The temperature outside is 73 degrees, and it is supposed to rain tonight in London. The sky is clear, and the temperature is 38 degrees Celsius. The barometer reading is 29.14 and falling. And let's see, in Singapore, the sun is shining brightly. Oh, and by the way, the moon should be full tonight here in San Jose. And your watch tells you all of that, the man interrupted. Yes, and more, said the stranger. You see, I invented this watch, and I can assure you there's no other timepiece like it in the whole world. I want to buy that watch. I'll pay you $2,000 for that watch right now. No, it's not for sale, said the stranger, and he reached to pick up his suitcases. Wait, $4,000. I'll give you $4,000 in cash right now. The stranger paused. No, I can't sell it. You see, I plan to give this watch to my son for his 21st birthday. I invented it for him to enjoy. Okay, listen. I'll give you $10,000. I'll give you $10,000 and I've got the money right here. I wonder who carries $10,000 around with them. $10,000? Well, okay, it's yours for $10,000. The man was absolutely elated. He paid the stranger, took the watch, snapped it on his wrist with glee, and he was turning and said thanks, and he turned to leave. Wait, the stranger said, with a big smile. He handed the 2 heavy suitcases to the man and added, don't forget the batteries. This man was so caught up in the gadget that he forgot to ask about the consequences. Let us not get so caught up in things that we don't look ahead to see what the possible consequences might be. It takes courage to walk by faith. The Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by sight. And we do have the promise in Proverbs 3:6 that God shall direct our paths. It takes enormous courage to follow your spiritual leading when what the world tells you is totally counterintuitive. Daniel's prayer practice was the secret of his power. Daniel knew how to pray. He knew how to lay hold of divine strength, and he became strong. He knew how to study divine wisdom, and he became wise. And in that wisdom, we are told that whenever Daniel prayed, he mingled his prayers with thanksgiving. This was his secret. What would you have done if you were in Daniel's shoes? Would you have compromised? Or would you have had the self-discipline to say no to the temptation to enjoy the better things in life? Daniel could have rationalized and made a case for eating what was served him. After all, he was being held hostage. We can always rationalize the things we really want to do. He was a captive. Surely God would understand if he gave in. But Daniel and the others clung to their truths. They may have used an affirmation like this: I am safe and secure in God's powerful presence. Can we say that together? I am safe and secure in God's powerful presence. Daniel and his three friends were examples to all of us of how to live a life without compromise. They were young men of character, and someone said character is what you do when no one else is looking. When the king built a golden idol and decreed that everyone must worship it, things got really, really scary then. Because our four young men were serving in the provinces, and they were expected to do this. They were expected to worship this idol, this golden idol. And obviously they could not do that. But there was no inner conflict. Their conscience was clear. They knew what they had to do, and that was not to worship the idol. So this week, take time to evaluate your conviction in the 5 basic principles. Take the 5th step and see where you are in compliance and where you feel you need to improve. For when we are in compliance, when we walk our talk, then we will be like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And as we enter our fiery furnaces and our lion's den experiences, we too will come out unscathed. Because we will have the law with us, we will not be divided. We will be whole. Daniel discharged his duty to his conscience, so there was nothing to disquiet him. When we're good with our conscience, when it's not calling to us, we are not disquieted. We are not in conflict. Daniel might have said this: I feel within me a peace above all earthly dignities, a still and quiet conscience. Let's say that together, shall we? I feel within me a peace above all earthly dignities, a still and quiet conscience. Let's all have that still and quiet conscience starting this new year. It's a whole new, clean slate. Every minute we begin anew. God bless.